Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Ben Mastracco and I'm a food coach. Today on Comedy Kitchen, we're gonna be talking about knives because a bad knife, well, that's just pointless. Yeah, that's right everybody. Today on Comedy Kitchen, the humor is gonna be just a little bit edgy. 2 for 2. 2 for 2. In all seriousness, having a good collection of knives is very important because knives are the most valuable tool in the kitchen. You use them pretty much more than you use anything else. But for the average home chef, you probably don't need a giant set of knives. If you're deboning fish and carving a lot of turkeys, you probably need more than 4 knives. But if you're just trying to be an efficient, effective home chef, you probably only need 4 knives, maybe even 3. And let's start talking about them right now. First up is our trusty chef's knife. Shocking, right? I don't need to harp on this too much, but it is the most used tool in the kitchen and it's important to have a good one, but you'd be surprised how cheap a good chef's knife can actually be. We'll talk about that in just a sec, but for right now, let's move on to knife number 2. Right behind our chef's knife, my favorite knife is gonna be my trusty pearl handle switchblade. Because I want everybody to know as soon as they walk into my kitchen that I ain't no punk ass and that they will get cut. Next up is a serrated knife, also known as a bread knife. You're gonna wanna use a serrated knife for things like bread, of course, but also something delicate like tomatoes that could get smushed with a chef's knife. But let's be honest, I don't use this knife at all. See, this particular bread knife has very sharp, jagged little teeth here. And this thing hacks through bread worse than I hack it up on open mic night. And if you've ever seen me do stand-up, it's pretty hacky. It's pretty bad, you guys. So this particular knife is not one that I use very often. I have a different knife that I like to use for some of those jobs. And we'll talk about that in just a sec, but first let's move on to knife number 3. Next up is our paring knife. This is for your small jobs, things like coring strawberries or removing the seeds from jalapeno peppers. Anything where your chef's knife is gonna be too big and bulky and awkward, and you need a little bit more precision. Sometimes using a chef's knife for some of these small jobs can actually be dangerous, so it's important to have one of these around, even if it's not a tool you use all that often. Now, a lot of the experts will tell you that your chef's knife, your serrated knife, and your paring knife kind of round out the top 3 of the most important knives that you need. But I actually have another knife that I like to use for a lot of jobs. I like to use these little, small serrated knives. You can call them a steak knife, you can call them a serrated paring knife, whatever the name is. These can be a very efficient tool for certain jobs. Cutting a cherry tomato with this guy is not very efficient. It's probably just big and bulky and kind of dangerous. So these little knives here are really good for some of those small jobs, like getting very thin slices of lemons or limes, or cutting grapes or cherry tomatoes in half, or anything like that. And if you like to eat a lot of meat, these are excellent little steak knives. They don't have those big jagged edges like my other serrated knife, so these cut through things really easily. They're very sharp, and they're just a really great tool to have around when the job is right. Now you might be thinking that it's time to go out to your local knife shop and invest hundreds of dollars in a fancy Japanese blade or something like that, but really you don't have to. If you go on Amazon and search for chef's knives, you'll see a ton of great options for very affordable prices. Honestly, when it comes to your knives, the most important part for a home chef is just how sharp are they. When I'm working with a new client, the first question I usually ask when I get into their house is, how sharp are your knives? And I'm also gonna go ahead and say that for the most part, I wouldn't bother sharpening your own knives. Using those cheap little knife sharpeners can actually damage your knives, and it doesn't cost very much money to go get them professionally sharpened by a person that knows what they're doing. A good professionally sharpened knife is gonna make you a much more efficient and effective home chef, and that's just gonna make you a happier person. If you got questions or comments when it comes to knives, leave a comment below. You can click here to subscribe, click here for another great Comedy Kitchen video, and I'll see you next time.